Good morning, orchid addicts of all various colors and shapes. It's me, Leonard, and I'm back with you with the second part of, my orchid collection update for the month of January 2019. And I'm going to start up with my Dendrobiums. I recently made an update video on both of my Dendrobiums, but a little time has already passed, and as you can see, my Comet King is starting to work on new growths, and its couple of buds are progressing quite lovely. I don't know how long my family has had this orchid because it was not purchased by me, but this year it created 5 very big promising growths and it has bushed up quite impressively. So in the coming months you will see a lovely but relatively poor display of my orchid. I have begun to water this Dendrobium because it is coming out of its dormancy period. And this is my second and the only other one of my Dendrobium orchids. This is the Dendrobium Stardust cultivar Firebird. And as you can see, it has begun on working quite a few new growths, many of which are actually keikis. I have begun to water this Dendrobium orchid as it is coming out of its dormancy. This plant has lovely orange colored blooms which possess a very mild fragrance. And hopefully this growth season it's going to be able to recover from its initial purchase setback and create a strong new root system and perhaps put out some blooms on these new canes which is currently growing. Now moving on to the category of my most expensive orchids, the Cattleya category. Here I have only 2 orchids, and as you can see this poor looking individual right here, this is my Cycnodes Vine Delight. As you can see, it has finished blooming quite a long time ago because of these dried flower spikes. I haven't bothered to cut them off yet, I find them quite amusing. And it is it's basically in its winter dormancy. As you can see, its leaves are yellowing and slowly falling away. This is the last one. But also a very interesting thing, I don't know if my phone will focus, but you can see my Vine Delight is starting to work on a new growth. And also another of the nodes on the other side is starting to plump up. So perhaps this one will have 2 directions of growth. In any case, I will be updating you soon as these growths push on and create some leaves with how I report this orchid. And without hesitation, my only other Cattleya type. This is arguably one of the most popular novelty orchid hybrids which is available on the market, and this is the one and only black orchid. Spoilers, it's not the only one. But it is one of the very few. And this is the Monnierara Millenium Magic Witchcraft. And as you can see, it's a very young orchid, but its new growth which it created in this summer is very impressive compared to the previous one, and it's currently about to finish going into its dormancy, but it's quite unwilling to do so. As you can see, the pseudobulb is shriveled, but a very little bit. If you see your Cattleya type orchid shrivel much more than this, you should probably spray the roots so the plant wouldn't risk dying. I recently made a flower bloom spotlight on my Vine Delight, but my Millennium Magic of course hasn't bloomed quite yet. Another part of this video and another cup of tea. So then, moving on to the original orchid queens. So, now, this here. This is a Cattleya species and it is called Cattleya lobata. And the variation is Coerulea. Remember that word, Coerulea. You will hear it quite a lot. Now, I purchased this orchid in April of 2014, and it originally had these 3 growths. It created in the summer this strong new growth, which isn't significantly bigger than the rest but still an improvement, and right now in the winter it's working on this new growth. I'm happy that it's working on new growth, but I don't expect this one to grow to an impressive size, maybe this size in its maximum. As you can see, I have this orchid planted in bark, and it has produced a very vigorous root system. All of these roots are roots created after I purchased it. I don't know how good it is for them to grow their growths in the winter. Surely they're not going to mature to their full potential, but in any case, this is a very vigorous orchid, and it has not bloomed for me yet. So, moving on the lines of Cattleya species, this is one of my prides and joys. This is the Cattleya walkeriana, variation Coerulea, and you can see 3 plants here. Now, it is common when you purchase Cattleya seedlings from nurseries that you will get multiple plants in the same pot, because when the people remove the seedlings from their gel-based medium as they are maturing, it is usually hard to separate individual plants because they're clumped up so closely. And here you can see this is the bushiest plant so far, and this is what you could say approximating in the mature size. This is not quite yet of a mature plant. You should not expect brooms from this sized walkeriana quite yet, but nevertheless it's finishing on maturing one of its new growths. It was starting to grow in autumn, and this is the smallest one. Now I fear this division will not be surviving because it is so small that I have a very difficult time watering it. So it had more leaves than this, but those starting to fall away because of rot. So maybe I'm going to be losing this plant. Don't be surprised if you don't see this individual in any of my further videos. Now, Cattleya Voltaire is a very interesting Cattleya species because it is a true miniature. It doesn't grow much more bigger than this, and this is small. But nevertheless, it produces quite big and very fragrant blooms. So maybe in the year of 2019, this individual might create some blooms for me. Also, it's very important to note that walkerianas take a very distinct dry winter rest, so you should not water your walkerianas unless you are seeing that their pseudobulbs are shriveling, which mine aren't. So these 2 plants have not received water for a couple of months now, while this has been watered. So yeah, let's see the future progress on this. But here you can see one of Cattleya Voltairiana's primary hybrids, and this is called Cattleya Mini Purple, variation Coerulea. And I forgot the name of its other parent, but it is a species. Here you can see 2 divisions which were brought to me together in a single pot. One of them is much more mature than the other. This Cattleya is also a miniature, but not exactly as small as the walkeriana. It grows a bit taller, but in any case it has a very similar appearance to it. It is also a fragrant Cattleya, but it has not bloomed for me. Currently it is in its winter rest period, so I'm not watering this orchid, and as you can see by its pseudobulbs, it does not need any watering. In my care, this plant created these growths. The first one was very small because when I purchased it, it had a very poor root system, but the second one is a bit bigger, quite a bit bigger. So I expect some blooms from this one in the year of 2019. But however, this division is a bit interesting because it is currently maturing one of its growths. That's very interesting. Because of that, this individual has not exactly entered its dormancy fully. As you can see, one of its pseudobulbs is a bit shriveled, so this one gets watered occasionally. This little Cattleya seedling is another species, and it is called Cattleya loddigesii, and the variation is trulia, also punctata. I'm very excited for this Cattleya, but it is very small and very far away from blooming, but it has these very beautiful, unique shaped blooms, which possess a wonderful fragrance. This orchid was featured in one of my latest videos where I cut off one of its rotting growths. But while this plant was in my possession, it created two new growths. One of them I cut off, it was here, and this one is the other new growth. This plant is recovering very slowly, but I have no doubt that it will be surviving. And here you can see two seedlings which came together when I ordered them. This hybrid is called Cattleya Voltaire, and it's a hybrid between three species, I think. One of its parents is Cattleya dygbiana, which is a very gorgeous, remarkable and popular Cattleya species, and the other parent is a hybrid CG Roebling. So this seedling is purchased only for the reason that I expect it to have very glorious, unique blooms. Maybe similar to dygbiana, maybe similar to CG Roebling. But in any case, these two seedlings are very vigorous, and as you can see, it have created quite a nice root system. I am unaware of if these are seed grown or cloned, so they might end up having different looking blooms if they are from different seeds. This seedling created a bifoliate new growth this summer, and currently it's working on a new growth. This seedling created these two big new growths, and currently it's working on another two growths. And here you can see one of my most impressive Cattleyas, and I have only a couple of actually mature sized Cattleyas. This is a species, and it is none other than Cattleya purpurata. The variation is schusteriana, and it possesses a gorgeous violet purple lip. This orchid is very close to mature size, but apparently it can grow much bigger than this. Currently, this orchid is reaching 40 or a little over that centimeters in height, and that's a lot. This one has not bloomed ever, neither has it bloomed in my care, and currently it's working on this small new growth. I don't know how big this growth will be ending up in the end, because it has started growing in the winter, so it's not receiving a lot of sunlight. But when I purchased this orchid, it came with all 5 of these pseudobulbs, but this one is the newest one. This one proceeded to create a root system, so this is telling me that Cattleya purpurata is one of those Cattleya species which create roots after it finishes maturing its pseudobulb. Moving on to something a little more exciting in the Cattleya alliance. This is a species known as Brassavola nodosa. So, as you can see here, this is quite a bushy orchid, and it created all of these big new growths in my possession. It came with these smaller ones. It has bloomed for me, but it created a distorted flower, which also didn't initially possess a fragrance. But approximately 4 days after its opening, it started releasing a very pleasant, similar to hyacinths but not quite, fragrance in the night. This orchid is a very vigorous grower, and my individual has 3 directions of growth. It is currently in its winter rest period, as it is not actively growing any of its new shoots. It has stopped in its track. I have it planted in a mixture of sphagnum moss and bark, and I am thinking to repot it in pure bark when it starts growing again, because it doesn't look like it's creating a very abundant root system within this medium, which is primarily sphagnum. I potted it in sphagnum because it originally came in sphagnum for me. I didn't much think about it, but Cattleya orchids genuinely prefer something more airy and dry as bark. Here you can see a very interesting Brassavola hybrid, and this is a primary hybrid between Brassavola cuculata and Cattleya purpurata. This is called Brassocattleya Amethyst, and it looks mostly like its Brassavola cuculata parent, but its blooms look more similar to Cattleya purpurata. It might have a heavenly fragrance, but I wouldn't know because it hasn't bloomed for me quite yet. I have it potted in pure sphagnum moss, and it came to me with this new growth. The tip of this new growth rotted away, but nevertheless the base of it is intact, so it will be able to push out a new growth. Currently it is not in active growth because it is in its winter rest period. Also, it is not very far away from being able to bloom, but it all depends on the size of the new growths created. Time for another sip from my tea. I don't know if this is an Orchid Collection spotlight or a teacup spotlight right now, but somehow a person has to make do in the morning. Here you can see a very famous Brassica nodosa hybrid. This one is called Myrmecatavola Francis Fox cultivar sunspots. And talking about the sun, it seems to be going away a bit. This window is what I assume an east exposure window, so it receives sunlight for the morning hours. This individual is a young plant, and it came to me with these 3 soda bulbs. After this orchid arrived to me, it started working on this small new growth. Even though it is not very impressive, it served this orchid quite well because it produced a little root system which helped this orchid recover quite greatly. Currently, since the middle of the autumn, it has been working on this substantially larger new growth, which is a unifoliate. This growth is nowhere near mature size and it will not bloom, but nevertheless it's a strong improvement and it will do this orchid quite a lot of good in producing new roots. Lastly, but not least, my Ryncholaelia dygbiana, and it originally had 5 growths. These 3 bigger ones and these 2 smaller ones. In my care throughout the summer and autumn, it matured this largest new growth, but it hasn't bloomed yet, and this growth didn't bloom also. An interesting thing, I don't know if my phone will be able to show it, you can see these little nubbins at the top of the pseudobulb. From there, typically a sheath would be produced, but as you can see there is no sheath on these growths, neither there is any sign. So these growths aren't going to be blooming, because these nubbins are not going to push on. These aren't nubbins, these are quite simply the endings of the pseudobulb. It could have produced sheaths and buds from there, but it never did, and it never will. Cattleyas don't usually produce buds after they have long since matured their growths, unlike Brassavolas perhaps. This is a very high light requiring orchid which has a very unique and beautiful frilly, large, pale yellow-green bloom. This species is used in a lot of large flower-sized Cattleya hybrids, known as Ryncholaelia Cattleyas. Currently it's working on 2 new growths. I doubt that these growths will be able to bloom because they're maturing in the winter, This species needs a lot of light, and in my country that also means direct sunlight, for it to be able to bloom. But nevertheless, I'm very happy for it working on 2 directions of growth. More directions of growth means more blooms at a time. This orchid is potted in pure sphagnum moss, and I have came to the conclusion that it is not a very good idea. I will be reporting it in pure bark medium once these new growths are going to start working on some roots. I can see this orchid is not doing particularly well in sphagnum medium because Cattleya type orchids usually require good drying out between waterings, and sphagnum moss does not provide that. Also, sphagnum moss accumulates quite a lot of algae and breaks down quickly, even though my brand is New Zealand sphagnum moss, which is very good quality. But you can see that there are not a lot of roots on the sides of these pots, and even if there are, they don't seem to be very healthy. So this tells me that this orchid could use repotting in bark medium. But anyhow, this seems to be the end of my January 2019 Orchid Collection update. I hope you have been enjoying these 2 parts. And let's have a victorious sip of the tea at the end of it. Press the like button down below if you enjoyed this video. Subscribe to my channel if you want to see more of these kind of gardening and orchid related topics from me. And I see you next time. Bye!